I love it.
I'm Sasha Nicole.
And I'm Star.
And I'm Dr. T.
And this is Amerikan Therapy, the definitive podcast on all things Black mental health. And we are back again, super excited. Star's drinking out the red cup, so we know this is going to be a good show.
We just had a very, very, very professional interview, okay?
Right.
So
I didn't even drink my wine. I was a little afraid she might judge me.
Hey, when you Secret Service, I was like, I am not messing around.
Mm-hmm.
We got a big one today, though.
We do. Exciting. What are we going over today, Star? What's our show today?
Okay, so today we are talking about those that serve, and honestly, specifically our brothers and sisters who serve, because there is a culture and an imagery in this country of the service person being not a Black person, and we know that just ain't true. So we brought a sister to the table to come on here and tell us what happens after you serve, while you're serving, and how your mental health is so key during and after your service, and what VA and what all these resources are out there to help you support your mental health.
Absolutely. And so not just any sister. Listen, y'all heard it first on Amerikan Therapy. We have Mary L. Tobin, and I need y'all to understand. So Mary Tobin has 17 years of leader development, project management, community engagement, and public speaking experience. She's extremely passionate about addressing social issues that negatively affect underserved communities and is committed to working with globally minded leaders and organizations to develop solutions that will positively impact underserved cities and communities. She is very active in the world of advocacy. Her public relations campaigns in the media have established her as a thought leader concerning diversity and inclusion. She's been featured in major publications such as New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, CBS, ABC, and now Amerikan Therapy. So she has lectured at the United States Military Academy, the University of Alabama, University of Georgia. She was also a featured speaker at South by Southwest in 2018, speaking about the usage of data and analytics to solve poverty. And one of her previous roles as the director of the Brownsville Partnership, an initiative of the national nonprofit organization Community Solutions. She is also a very proud graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and the New York Institute of Technology. She's a proud combat veteran, having served 10 years in the United States Army as a communications officer, including 2 combat tours. And her previous roles included senior project manager for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, a President Management Council Fellow in the U.S. Department of Treasury, and a Chief Operations Officer for the city of Jacksonville, Florida. So her personal motto is, quote from the late Muhammad Ali, "Service to others is the rent you pay for the room here on earth." So, without further ado, we're super happy to have you, Mary, because as long as I've known you, you have exuded that motto, to serve others. And, I don't want to say that's a hard motto, but you have continued to act in love in that motto, to be that person. And so we could just go ahead and start. And how did it just start? You go to West Point, you're a combat veteran, you've seen and experienced a lot of things, and we'll talk about some of the things that you experienced as a combat veteran, but you still every day want to serve others. How does that work?
Lots of bourbon. I grew up in a low socioeconomic area on the west side of Georgia, west side of Atlanta. I'm sorry, I'm from Atlanta, not Georgia. And I grew up seeing my mother take our last, like she would feed us, take her last and wrap that up in a plate, like with aluminum foil, and set it beside the back door, the front door, so that my family members who were battling drug addiction could have something to eat. She always put $2 on top, but we didn't have nothing. But my mother would always make a plate of food, $2 on top, just in case my family member came. And so from an early age, I just remember being like, if you got something, then you got enough to give somebody else. And I think over the years, I just saw random people who could see some potential in me or some light in me, and they would just invest time and money and effort and reputation and all the things into me. And so I just keep thinking, like, there is a Mary Tobin still in the hood who needs a Mary Tobin. So I gotta live my life where either I can reach that Mary Tobin that's still back in the hood, or I can inspire somebody else to reach the Mary Tobin that's in their hood and in their local community. And I feel like that domino effect is what makes the world go round, right? So, I mean, you know, my faith set is of Christianity. I feel like God has just put angels in my path over time to just remind me that I'm all right. So now I got to do the same for others, right? So I think that it's more genetic than anything, but I also see how this thing works. And there's way too much evil in the world to go ahead and feed into that. You know, there's so much good that can happen when you pay something forward or you reach down and you lift somebody back up. So I want to, you know, and I just seen that throughout my career. So that's where that's rooted in.
I love it, Mary. You know, first of all, look, I'm trying to come be your chief of staff or whatever you get ready to do. Look, come on, bring a bitch on board. You know, I'm professional 9 to 5. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Like about 7. And look, I work for the military, so you know I get up at 5. But after 6, it's dicey. Okay. But like I mean, first of all, you went to West Point, like. That right there, drop the mic. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, all right, girlfriend. But like being in the military, I've worked at DOD for years, and the culture is it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood, but it is sometimes not inclusive of our African American service members in its imagery and how we communicate and we view veterans. I was actually at an event with the NAACP, and a Caucasian woman had approached and talked about, you know, we need to support our veterans. And our president in my chapter is like, she was like, yeah, I'm a veteran. And the woman's face was like, so like, what are you working on? How do we bring light to the plight of our Black veterans, of our brown veterans, of our Native, Indigenous veterans, and their mental health and the things that they're challenged with, especially after they serve, when this country doesn't really even include them in the story of serving?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And you know, working my way up until this time with you all, I've been thinking a lot about that, especially for service members who are still serving now and veterans now. I'm thinking you take your whole Black self and then you go join the military. And in an instant, in an 8-week period, you're told to shed anything that you came there with. And now you're all green, right? You're all military, even the same uniform, saluting the same way, you're learning the same stuff. And now you're supposed to be a part of this military brotherhood, you know, sisterhood, fraternity, if you will. The challenge though is that the military is a reflection or a microcosm of society. So just like there are rapists in society, there are rapists in the military, there are racists in society, there's racists in the military. So even though I now dress the same, I walk the same, I talk the same, I have the same standards for my physical health and my performance, my melanin doesn't go away. So what happens is when you start to bring up, hey, making the N-word joke is not funny, or talking about Black folks being lazy or eating watermelon when you invite them over your house, for whatever family gets is not funny, then it's looked upon as you're attacking the unity in the military. Like you're eroding the togetherness and the unity. But what you're doing is reminding them that, hey, I didn't shed my melanin when I came into the military. I didn't shed my religious beliefs or my non-religious beliefs. I didn't shed any of that, my orientation, all the things. And oh, by the way, it's my uniqueness that makes me an asset to the organization. But the military doesn't inherently look at it like that because there is a military culture. So everything about you that is not military is now subordinate. So I can't be a woman all the time. I got to pick and choose. I can't be Black all the time. I got to pick and choose. I got to choose when my Southern accent, when my drawl comes out, because if it doesn't benefit the military, then it's an opposition. I think about, and I'll say this and I'll be quiet. I think about the Navajo code talkers. So in World War II, they were assets. Their culture was an asset because our enemies could not decode the Navajo language, right? So it's an asset then. But how quickly do we now turn to this era in which we don't want to remove racist statues from the reservations and the lands of our Native American brothers and sisters when they're part of the reason why we even won World War II. So how can you erect statues of generals who literally committed genocide on their land, but then get mad when they demand that you give them respect? It is this and beautifully painful dichotomy, being a marginalized person or a person of color or a Black person in a more dominant culture that was created by white heterosexual Christian normative practices, right? So my Blackness is in daily opposition to the majority culture. I'll say that. So how are we surviving? God and bourbon and lots of spades games. I'm gonna tell you that much.
Dr. T, when we hear Mary say that, and we know it to be true, we see it, every day, and even the times where we don't even acknowledge the slaves who served in the military. That is a huge burden to bear, to go in and say, I can't be Black today, or I can't be this today. How do you deal with that type of trauma? Because I know in the midst of it, you might pretend that doesn't do anything to you. I know my father, who's in the military over 20 years, and in his mind, it was just part of the process. I don't even think he ever took the fact that he couldn't be a Black man in the military. He was a military man. How do you deal with that trauma afterwards?
Well, I think afterwards is the great question, because I think actually some of the things they teach you in the military about compartmentalizing and getting the job done, that works when you're in the military. And the big challenge that our veterans have when they leave is that literally one day, everything you did to be healthy and to thrive and to be a member of a team worked. And then you come home where you see yourself one way, the people that love you see the way that you left, not the way that you've become. And everything, or the vast majority of things that you learned in the military, do not translate into living in the community. And so you almost like Alice in Wonderland. You are living now, not just in 2 worlds or 3 worlds, but 4, 5, 6 worlds at any given time. And so I really believe that veterans really, really, really have to spend some time thinking about shedding things and reintegrating and really learning how to unlearn. Don't lose those skills, because those skills will be valuable again. But to incorporate into a family, I know that many veterans, they have trouble when they come back home, because so authoritarian in the service, and so discreet and concrete, and it's there's no room for second guessing, and that's important in the military. But then you come with your wife and 3 kids who've been waiting for you, and they just used to living messy old life, any old kind of way, and that doesn't translate well. And so a lot of veterans really struggle when they come back home, because the things that they learned and the things that they did to survive in that really wonderfully, the way that Mary described the environment for a Black person in the military. And then you come home and it's like, it's almost like Alice in Wonderland is the best analogy I can have, where things just don't make sense. And the stuff that you used to do just doesn't work. And your family doesn't understand, because they haven't been through what you've been through. They're proud of you. They're glad to have you home, but they in some ways just want to pick up and keep going where you left off, and you are not that person anymore.
Mary, can you speak to how you've been able to manage mentally going through some of those things? Because you went through West Point at a time when I think you can say the number of how many Black people were even at West Point during your time. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were one of the people who chartered or helped charter having a group for Black people who were at West Point to have some sense of belonging. But as I've seen and known you and seen you grow through your career, military or personally, how do you navigate through those instances or occurrences where you're dealing with people who are racist, where you're dealing with people who are sexist, and you're at this high rank, or you're having to go through that pain? Like, how do you transcend from that place and deal with it, and then wake up the next day and deal with it again?
Yeah, most people deal with it badly, honestly, and especially if you are a Black officer. So the majority, somewhere between 75 to 85% of the enlisted ranks, the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, they are soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines of color. But then the higher you go, it's almost like in the corporate world. Higher you go, the less Black leaders you'll see. And so now translate that to, if I'm graduating from West Point and I am an officer, now I'm going into an Army unit. Literally my first 3 Army units, I was the only woman and the only Black woman, and then the only Black officer. So not very well, because I didn't have a community to plug into. And so you struggle. I mean, I think one of my assignments, I tapped into my church family. Fortunately for me, a lot of the members were veterans, so I could vent and get advice and guidance. But then when I went to another assignment, that wasn't the case. And so I struggled and really kind of fell into just bad habits outside of exercising, which I was required to do. And then when I tried to get smart enough to tap into therapy, literally the system is just repute with white therapists, a lot of whom are also civilians. So now I culturally can't connect with you, and then experientially I can't connect with you. And I'll tell you, my first couple of therapists, I pray for them every night, because I was just not a good person. I was a complete a-hole. Like one white woman questioned why women would even join the military, and I flipped the desk on her. Like and I didn't even know I was like that. I was just sitting there.
And you should have, sister.
I flipped the desk on her. Another one handed me this piece of paper for this medication. Here I am, a very high tempo leader trying to get stuff done. And now you're going to put me on Prozac. Me not knowing anything about medicine, I just threw the prescription in her face. It wasn't until literally 2 years ago, and this was me having to pay out of my pocket, because there were just not a group of Black therapists I could tap into the military healthcare system. Black, I think I want to say Black girls therapy, Black, something like that, like Black women and some therapists. And my friend said, listen, go on this website, you'll see this sister. She was a combat veteran, a licensed counselor and therapist. And the minute I walked into her room, she took one look at me and I crumbled, y'all. I just cried. Because I mean, the room felt like Erykah Badu's house, first of all. But then like on the wall was her awards from her time in the military. And for the first time I felt connected. And that woman in 1 year was helping me to heal from 15 years of trauma. So from West Point, like just figuring out or feeling like, you know what, somebody does call me the N-word, or if I'm doing an inspection because I'm a leader in the Corps of Cadets and somebody's hanging up the Confederate flag every time I go in there for an inspection, or, white cadets think that it's funny to dress up as KKK members and scare the hell out of their Black roommate. Like, I've suppressed that because I thought that that's the Black tax of attending an elite school, right? If all these people before me could deal with it, so I like literally taught myself that I have to just survive. And if I thrive, it's because I'm the exception, right? Not realizing that nobody should have to go through that. So it wasn't until I met this good sister, this therapist, some 15 years after I graduated from West Point, some 10 years after I got out of the military, that I realized that I shouldn't have to go through that. And I do deserve a community of people that I could connect to, but I didn't have that. And I think that's, honestly, Sasha, that's part of my motivation for starting the Black alumni group at West Point, was to create that sense of community. Because when we start to get really raw and authentic about our experiences, then I can say, oh, here you go, brother, you need to go therapy. Here you go, sister, let me connect you to my therapist. So that sense of community is actually the way that we're helping people to heal. And then also giving back to each other, right? So community service and volunteerism is actually how we get people to start to heal. But it's actually me first. These actions are healing me first, I believe.
So Dr. T, the alley oop, okay? So Mary's story is not uncommon, right?
Not uncommon.
And
Yeah.
she didn't feel safe until she saw that sister that represented her. But we just know numerically that sister doesn't exist. Enough of those sisters don't exist to serve the volume and the gap of mental health needs, specifically even for our Black veterans and our Black female veterans, which is a whole nother, like you can't even wear your hair but 3 different, what is it, 8 styles now? I think
Right.
maybe 8 now. Like, what do they do?
Yeah, it's the age-old question we talk about on this show, and of course I talk about in many circles. In a perfect world, we would all find the therapist who matches up with us, culturally, socioeconomic wise, genetically. Like they would just be the perfect match, and we just go on the shelf, pull them out, sit down, and do our business, right? But that's not the world we live in, because therapists are made in the same, racist, white supremacist educational system that all the rest of us are made in. And so there's not enough therapists on any level, social work, master, psychologist, doctorate. There's not enough people of color represented in that field to serve everybody in the community of color who would want that service. So how do we find a therapist who we can relate to if they're not an exact match? And you can see a person's soul. We do it all the time. That's how we survive as Black Americans. We can see who we can trust. We can see who we may still have to educate them. We may still have to have allied conversations. We may still have to explain things to them, but we know that their heart is good and they really are trying to help us. And so that's what we need to use, that discernment when we're looking for a therapist and we can't find one, because, Mary was fortunate and blessed that she could have personal resources to be able to get a therapist outside of her insurance network. But many people, they have to go with what they can get in their insurance network. And that typically is a much more limited pool, usually has fewer people who speak English as their native, if we're all talking, truth. There's just not the diversity of therapists, particularly depending on if you have a public insurance, you really have less options. And so we have to just be willing. One of the things I love that Mary said, her first 2 therapists, which suggests that she has had more than one therapist, right? And I tell people all the time, therapists are like jeans. It can look great on the rack, but you put them on and you're like, my butt looks terrible in this, right? And so you have to keep trying on jeans until you find the pair that you're like, okay, this is what I'm talking about. That's the way therapists are. You have to keep trying them on until you find one. Like Mary, when she walked in the room, she was like, I'm home. And then she got to work. So yes, you're going to have some bumps in the road. You're going to have some people, and sometimes you might even get it wrong, but you're going to have to go through that, because we don't have the luxury of having some kind of therapist, scanner that we can just wave over a person and see if they're going to be a good match for us. So I just always encourage people, and don't assume that because someone has brown skin, they're going to be a good match for you. We see right now, I mean, we are in this post-election season where people who had skin that looks like yours and mine voted for somebody that didn't think in their best interest. So don't just assume that people who have the same skin as you are going to be working in your best interest either. So you have to do the work to find a therapist so you can do the work, right? There's no other way around it. I wish that I had some magic potion or some magic question. You just have to use your discernment and you have to do the work.
Mary, when you were serving and you're going out there, like you said, you're an officer, you're maybe the only one, you are the only one. And then you have people who thought it was funny to call you the N-word, who thought it was funny to maybe dress up as a KKK for, and scare people. But then you got to go out and lead them. And not only lead them, bear the responsibility of bringing them back home after they've disrespected you. That's a high level of a lot of things, a lot of words that come to mind. Is that too a part of, because I want to get deep in, because I think a lot of times, especially, people don't want to speak against the machine, but is that also a deep way of how you pick one or the other? I pick the green versus picking the respect, or I pick the
Absolutely. The nature of the military, of that institution, right, is, I'm a civilian, so I can say what other folks can't say. It is one of the major institutions in this country, which was based and founded in white supremacy, period. And I mean, it literally took an executive order by President Truman in 1948 to get the military to stop being as racist as it was, even though there was a whole law 2 years earlier that said stop being racist. So the president had to come behind the law and remind them, hey, it's illegal to be this way, right? It's illegal to be segregated in the military. It's all the things. And then we know the story, how hard the Tuskegee Airmen had to, all these things, right? And so it is embedded. I heard one of my good friends say that racism is as American, white supremacy is American as apple pie and baseball, right? And so racism is as true to the culture of the military as it is any other major institution. So knowing coming in, there's this in the back of your mind, I'm probably going to be the only one or a few. And in that means that I got to be 2 or 3 times better. So even if I want to wear my hair in sister locks, I know that if we're still looking at pictures as a basis for promotion, I should probably be wearing weaves that I can tie up really quickly, or I should perm my hair, even though it's unhealthy for me and it makes my scalp break out. Brothers, I know I need to just shave all the way down, even though it breaks my skin out, but I'm a hell of an officer. Don't complain about any of that, because why the military is supposedly the closest to being a meritocracy that we have in America, right? Like, if I wear my uniform like this, if I run hard and I do enough push-ups, if I'm good at my job, I'll probably get promoted. But there's still that racist, systemic racist ceiling that you'll always hit. And so you choose, you figure it out. You go, if I want to get past here, I got to go all in. And going all in meaning I suppress all of my individuality and I assimilate more into the larger or the dominant culture or community, which is rooted in white culture. Like, there's just, if you're white, that's how you get up. So even if you want to wear a dashiki to the barbecue, you wearing Dockers and your shirt, polo shirt tucked in, and with the brown belt and the brown shoes. Even that you hate dressing like that, but that's how you're going to dress. And so you literally choose. You choose every single day, knowing that it's not merely just me being a sassy Black woman officer that day. It's, oh, she doesn't want to play the game, or she's not a team player. Like it is very well defined, and that every move you're making could be impactful on your career. A hair choice could be impactful on your career. How you speak could be impactful on your career. And it's none of the other measures of success that your white colleagues and counterparts have, but you think, what? At least I'm not going through what Henry O. Flipper, the first Black graduate of West Point, went through, right? He went through hell, so my hell is less than his hell, so I guess I'm okay. And over time, less and less and less of you is brought to the table. So like Dr. T was alluding to earlier, now once you get out, you got to relearn who the hell you are. Like, what does it mean to be a Black woman now post? And oh, by the way, my community is not necessarily comfortable with the fact that I served and I went to war. They're proud of me, but they're not comfortable. And then the more contentious things get, now I'm a sellout, or I'm a baby killer, or you support the man, right? So now I'm hurt by my people, proud of my service, upset that there's still Black folks dealing with the same racism I dealt with. And the real me is somewhere in the middle. where I'm proud to have served a country that sometimes doesn't like me very much. So
But Dr. T, like, how do you marry? Like, first of all, thank you for your honesty and your truthfulness. Cause so many, like, I work in DLD, so like I see it. I be like, she knows she is not like that. But it's part of getting in the room, and it's imperative that we be in the room for other reasons. So then, like, you leave. How do you deconstruct all that shit? I mean, that's a lot on any human being. And then many people look at somebody like Mary and wouldn't even think she served anybody. Like literally, I have a girlfriend. She went to the Air Force Academy, and literally, we were in Nordstrom's one day, and we had one of them, a Karen incident, and she lost her shit. And I was like, what the hell's wrong with you? But now I'm hearing Mary's story, and I'm hearing about how you was like flipping tables on therapist. I had never put in context that, like, I went to A&T, you went to the U.S. Air Force Academy. You probably didn't have cookouts and kickbacks and like during your formative years. I've been partying for years. You over here just trying to like how do you even begin to handle all that?
I think the first thing you do is have conversations like this where you bring awareness to yourself, but also to your support system and your family members, because we want to support our veterans when they come home. We just don't realize what they've been through and what they're going to need from us in order for them to be successful again in our communities. So we forget that they have this whole, black box kind of experience that we will never know about, but they need our patience. They need our consideration. They need a whole lot of things from us while they're trying to figure it out, right? Because it's not like if they just had a little patience, they'd be fine. No, they don't, as Mary so eloquently described, they don't have a clue what they are in for and what they have been through until they start to unpack it. And quite honestly, I don't know that you can like come out of the military day one and then day two, you're like, oh, let me get a therapist and sit down and be successful. You got to go through some stuff. You got to realize, you got to, brush up against a few things in order to get to that point where you're ready. You almost have to deconstruct before you can start to process. And so during that time, unfortunately, sometimes families break up, people lose relationships, people get ostracized from their faith communities because it's a lot. I mean, I've worked with veterans, and when they come back, it takes a long time to take that green uniform off, even though you've taken that green uniform off. And people are no longer saying, because when you walk through the airport and you've got your uniform on, even though people hate you, they're like, thank you for your service. It's like the platitude. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. You take the uniform off, people stop saying thank you for your service, and they just start treating you like every other Black person, right? And so we have to remember that they still are in that same mindset. So they need some support from us and understanding and encouragement that, you will get through this. We will get through this together. Let's work through it together. Let's go to therapy together. Maybe there's a community, the churches are always very big in supporting community. And so that would be a great place for returning veterans to have a sense of support and community, and their spouses and families to connect, to support each other. We have to start figuring out how to do those things and stop pretending like we don't know this is happening each and every day in houses all over the country, all over America.
And so Mary, you get out the service, you go into the government, you serve, you go up the ranks in government, and then I'll never forget, and then you said, I don't want to do the government anymore. I want to help the people, which means that helping the people sometimes you don't get the same pay or the same benefit. What brought you to that decision to then, to go not only to help the people, you go and work for nonprofits?
I'm glad you made that distinction, sis, because An extra added layer. You know what it was? It goes back to the initial discussion around service. So whether you like it or not, you wake up every single morning in the military with a purpose, with a mission. You know exactly what you're doing, your job, the role, all the things, you know. And I was medically retired from the military. I got hurt during my first deployment to Iraq, and those injuries just kept with me. And the doctor said one day, hey, if you want to be able to walk by the time you're 40, I need you to make a lifestyle change. And so even my departure from the military was quite sudden. It was unwanted. But I think the biggest goal, the hole or gap that I had in my life was a sense of purpose. And I was just like, what am I doing here? Like, so it wasn't me just making money wasn't enough for me. I just needed to feel like I was doing something and giving back. And so that's what inspired me to make the leap into the nonprofit sector. And even though my first role was in Brooklyn, I was helping a community that was similar to the one that I grew up in, like almost the demographics, the number of public housing developments, all the things. And so it really felt like I was taking everything that I learned in the military at West Point, the leadership skills, systems engineering, all the things, sociology, and all of my experiences in combat. And I'm going, okay, I'm going to use all of those gifts, talents, and skills to help my people, period. Right? I'm going to teach people how to be leaders and lead yourself out of these problems, how to look at the challenges the right way, using data and solving the right problem. And honestly, for me, that, you know, looking back on it, that helped me process a lot of the PTS, the post-traumatic stress that I had not dealt with, right? So the first time I think it was the second week on the job in Brooklyn, and I come out of the community center that I was leading because I just wanted some fresh air, me being real green to the situation. And I step outside the door and there was yellow tape right outside my door. Young brother had been stabbed right in front of the community center. But me seeing that scene literally in that moment took me back to Iraq. So like I wasn't even physically there in my mind. I just stuck. And I remember my colleagues being, you know, director, you okay? You okay? Like they were talking to me. I couldn't even process it. In that moment, I could see Iraq, but then I could also see back home in Atlanta, like childhood, Iraq, and then present day. And so one, it made me realize, oh, Mary, you got some stuff to deal with, which sent me back to the VA. It was the second therapist, so I flipped the table on, but, you know, I'm glad my first thought was like, okay, Mary, you're not all right. And it immediately triggered like me having a lot of insomnia, but it also had this impact like where I could do something about it. I couldn't do anything about person that was lost in Iraq, couldn't do anything about the death that I saw in my childhood, but now I could work super, super hard to keep another person from dying. And so like I poured myself into the work as a way of kind of healing myself from what I had been through and what I'd seen. And I didn't even realize that. Like, so I actually overworked myself though, because I wasn't really dealing with the pain. I was just dealing with, okay, you can do something about it. Because that's how veterans were wired to do, which is why we look at what's happening in the country now, we get frustrated, like, stop talking about it, do something. Because that's what we do. We do something about problems. And so that's how I processed it. But I wound up overworking myself to death in that role. Not a lot of self-care.
I mean, that's so important. A lot of veterans use, a lot of people, but veterans included, use a lot of unhealthy coping strategies. Again, you're trying to use what worked for you in the past. So it might be alcohol. In a lot of countries where you serve, substances that are illegal here are not illegal there. So you have access to things to help you sleep, to help you not remember, working hard, just all kinds of things that can then ultimately be detrimental if they're not a balanced life. We're all trying to learn how to live a balanced life, but when your coping mechanism takes you out of balance, that's another sign or another signal to your brain or your body that it's time to get some help, because the things that you're doing to help aren't working, they're also hurting.
Mary, you mentioned how you were, can you explain first what a combat veteran is, just for people who, may not know? But then two, is there anything or something that you can share where you're serving a tour, you get hurt, and what it's like then with the stresses and getting the disability, or if there's any difference where it's like, I didn't went out here and fought these wars for you, and now you don't even want to acknowledge not only the pain that I'm in emotionally, but the pain that I am in physically. Yeah. Tremendous pain.
Yeah, so first of all, a combat veteran is a service member who went into a combat zone, who served in a combat zone. So if it's Operation Enduring Freedom, which was Afghanistan, Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was Iraq, or Panama, Korea, Vietnam, if you served in a combat zone, then you are deemed a combat veteran. If you are a service member who served at least 6 months on active duty, so that's even in basic training, and you were discharged under honorable conditions, meaning not bad conduct or anything malicious or nefarious, then you're eligible for disability. I knew because of my injuries while I was serving in a combat zone that I would have disability coming to me for the rest of my life, meaning I would have mental health support, some sort of health care support as it relates to my injuries. Then there's other kind of vocational or educational benefits that come with the longer that you've served. And so I knew that I would have access to all of that. I think what's interesting is when you're on active duty, when you're still serving, I mean, the service is boom, 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 right? If my head hurts, let's go. If I'm in pain, let's go. The gap though is actually in mental health resources. If I broke my leg today and I was still on active duty, I would go in, they would x-ray me, she's broken leg, they would cast me up, then they would put me on a treatment plan to get me back into the fighting force. If I go to a behavioral health specialist, a mental health specialist, it literally, red flags go up. Now all of a sudden I can't do half my job. They don't know if I'm deployable anymore. Everybody's trying to figure out if I can be a good soldier or commander or officer anymore. Like it literally takes you out of the game. And that's not something that we're very honest about, speaking openly about. I joke, when I came back from my first deployment, I knew something was wrong because I was driving my car and a paper bag flew in the street, and I swerved like I was trying to dodge an IED. I literally, in my mind, it reminded me of a convoy that I was on in Iraq. And so I'm like, I gotta go talk to somebody. Y'all, I dressed up like Inspector Gadget. I had on like a trench coat, a hat, dark glasses. I'm like the only one of like 5 Black women officers on the whole installation. And like, they don't know my black Nissan with tinted windows and and I literally am sneaking up to the, because it was so stigmatized. Once you get out of the military though, the VA is becoming a lot better with how they render resources. The challenge though is you still see systematic barriers based off of race and gender. So because I'm so young, I am often treated as if my injuries are not as severe. They always assume that I'm a daughter or a spouse. So I have to I got to carry my paperwork with me all the time. No, sir, no, ma'am. I served in war. I'm entitled to these types of abilities. So I still have to fight. They diagnose more Black service members with anxiety disorder versus post-traumatic stress. That diagnosis of post-traumatic stress comes with a higher disability rating, which is more money and more access to resources. And so like, it is constantly like chipping away at this system that is still not built for Black people or people of color and women. The model of the VA is literally gender-based. And we've been fighting for them to change it from just addressing men who have fought in war to men and women or service members. So we're still fighting for the improved inclusivity around VA benefits, but it is tough. It's tough out here for all vets, but it becomes even more difficult when you put Black and woman onto it, I will say.
And then as a healthcare system, the VA, is not as innovative as, the commercial market is. I think my hypothesis has always been because it's a government agency. So they don't have the same drive to use resources wisely. And so even though a great deal of money does go into veteran healthcare, they're still behind the eight ball in terms of what they offer in terms of innovative state-of-the-art treatment and models and programs that they don't have available, they haven't purchased because they're still working in a government slow-paced model. And even unfortunately, some of the doctors there, they've been working there 40 years or whatever. And so they haven't kept up with their skills. So yeah, there is a lot of benefits, and I'm grateful that, veterans who are able to access that, but also the VA still has, as a healthcare system, a lot of innovation to do just to get in on pace with the commercial market.
This was excellent. This was absolutely excellent.
Absolutely. Mary, is there anything that you would want to just, leave off with the current work that you're doing? Oh, and you had the bourbon commercial, right? Which one was it? I don't remember. I just remember me screaming, "Oh, no, Mary!"
Yeah, Evan Williams. I was featured on a bottle of bourbon earlier this summer. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, some of my community service work. So I was, that was part of my life, being featured on a bourbon bottle. So,
can you share just any last things you'd want to leave off to leave with the viewers, with people who are veterans, with Black women, and just the community work that you're currently doing and working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I upon reflecting on the fact that I was coming on this particular show, I thought about a moment coming back from my first deployment when, I was performing at a high level of excellence. And I can remember the day that I just could not get up out of bed. I'd had 8 hours of sleep, I'd exercised, all the things, but I could not get myself out of bed. I was depressed. I had no idea what was going on. Like, I just knew that I just couldn't perform the way I did. And it never occurred to me, baby girl, you went to war and you came back and you lost some people. And a piece of you will forever be changed because of that experience, because war is not normal. But I tried to teach myself that it was normal, and I didn't recognize that I had changed and I needed help. So the first thing I want to say is, when you recognize that something's not right, because you recognize it before anybody else does, get help, figure it out. If it takes going to your medical doctor first and he or she tells you, hey, you need to go to this doctor, keep going, because that feeling is not going to go away. There is something wrong. So get help. Even if your family says that therapy is for white people, then reply, therapy is for healed people. So that's number two, seek your healing. So if it's in therapy, or if it's in giving back, figure that out, because we have something to give back. It's the circle of life. It's the only way we become better is if we reach inside of ourselves, figure out what our gifts and talents are, and leave it all out there. Leave a legacy of who you were on the earth. And then, lastly, I'll say that, I'm so proud to be a co-founder of Do More Together, which is the Black Alumni Association for West Point. And what we're doing is creating a model for what it looks like to get your education, get your success, and to go reach back and give it back to somebody else. And so we're doing it by building a community of mentors, a community of corporations who hire explicitly Black folks, highly educated Black folks, a networking community, a community which we recruit Black folks to go back into institutions of higher learning and to give back that way. And hopefully we're creating a model for change, because it doesn't matter what the vote count is tomorrow or the next day, we survive. And the only way we change that survival to thriving is by reinvesting in each other. So I just appreciate this platform of amazing Black women, skilled Black women, but what Black women with a heart to give back. Thank you for creating this. I'm praying God's biggest blessings on y'all, because without platforms like this, doesn't matter the work that I get done. We need my work. We need the storytellers. We need the advocates. We need those folks spending money on it. And I just appreciate what you all are doing, the positivity and the love. And I love y'all for real.
Thank you. Dr. T, what say you?
I would just speak to both the veterans and the family members and community members of veterans that this is a process, right? Returning home, whether you were combat or not, it's a process. And so processes take time. And so just remembering that, supporting each other and thinking of, you know, the audience has heard me speak many, many times about how we can support each other. The idea of veterans, because if you go to any Black church in America, there's probably quarter of them, somebody in that church has been veterans, and create your own support group. Find a space to share so you can normalize what you've been through and what you're going through, trying to reintegrate into the community. And then the spouses and the family members and the children have a support group. All come at the same time and then go to separate rooms, and then everybody go home together feeling a little bit better. Like these kind of ideas, they don't cost any money, and we really can help each other. So be creative about how we support each other. We're grateful for those who go and serve. We're wonderfully blessed that they came home, but then we need to continue to support them as they transition into civilian life again.
Absolutely. Star?
I got two things. Mary, I always have two things, so that's why they laughing. So one, namaste. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your honesty and all the gifts you have yet to give to society. But so my first thing is this: for those that are operating in what's the word, like at a high level, right? Like we did a show about, folks that are operating at a high level, their representation of depression and trauma often do not look like what we think of a person who is in need of mental health services. We are great at masking that stuff, right? So for those individuals, I just piggyback Dr. T really about the process, but I would just add, be gentle with yourself and learn to re-engage gentleness. It takes a whole lot of strength and work and time and a support system to get back to gentle, especially when you've been in war. There's one of my friends, he's a peer of mine in teaching meditation. He has an organization called Armored Down. He's a former Army Ranger. It's a wonderful program. I've taught some of their classes. They're like guys that are like special ops guys, and they're like, I'm like, lower your shoulders. But it's a great program. So there are resources out there. Google's great. And then my second thing is, so we just presented at MIT, we got something radical advocacy-wise that I think could help the VA community. And I know will help our Medicaid and Medicare community around bringing more culturally competent, because we know the provider volume is minimal. And that pipeline is probably 10, 12, 15 year out to get someone from, to get them all the way there. So what we're trying to work on is finding a way to bring our community members and like VA, bringing people like Mary and with similar experiences to help them navigate that continuum, that care continuum that is often just structurally complex, right? So with this idea of a mental health doula, like you got a birthing doula, why couldn't you have a mental health doula and have a sister that could be like, okay, now Mary, don't flip that table when you go talk to this white woman who don't know nothing about what you went through. So there are opportunities. We're gonna ask Mary to help us. I don't use Dr. T name all. Like, who is Dr. T? So we grabbing Mary too, but there are ways to close gaps and provide service or provide support more so in the interim. So our show is definitely dedicated to that. And thank you, Mary. And we don't already signed you up to help us. So.
Indeed. Thank you all. Yeah, Mary, like we said, don't forget, bring us on to the White House now. But no, this has been a great show. And there's not a lot more that I could add besides just saying that, we want our veterans to be well, but more than anything, we want our people, we want our Black women and Black brothers to be well, to work towards wellness, to work towards healing. And we just thank you. We thank you for your transparency and vulnerability and sharing the truths and the things that you've gone through. And we are, please, you know, huge advocates of the work that you're doing and the work that you're going to continue to do, as well as, you know, the things that are going to happen with West Point. So, you know, we're also here as a great resource to show up and show out for you. And to all of our veterans out there, our listeners, you know, one, like Dr. T said, be patient, you know, be helpful, be kind, try to understand that this is a process, you know, and like Star said, you know, seek out, maybe there might be someone who kind of help guide you through. So with that, without further ado, we love you. Thank you again, Mary. Amerikan Therapy with the K, and we out.